bringing you up to date on all the action from a busy weekend of women's soccer. This is USL Super League Game Week on SiriusXM FC.
Welcome into Game Week on SiriusXM, joined by former Georgia forward Marion Crowder. I'm Anna Witte. We are recapping a little bit of Week 14. We saw a hat trick from Brooklyn's forward Luana Gravias on Week 14, and Carolina get their first loss of the season. Plus, we are joined by Brooklyn's head coach Jess Silva. Marion, gosh, it's been a busy week already, probably for both of us, but I know you had a chill weekend at Tybee Island. How was your weekend?
I don't know if I would use the word chill. We went there to go see, family, hang out with family. Family is filled with toddlers, so It was a very active.
That's all we need to hear.
Very wholesome. Nice wake up call for me that my dog is not the only one that wakes up at 6. So do toddlers every single day, no matter what. So
nice.
How was your weekend though? You had some fun time with friends.
I did. I had a former teammate get married this weekend actually in Charlotte. So I hosted a house full of people, which was a ton of fun. No toddlers, no babies, which is a completely different vibe on the weekend. But no, we had a great time.
Weddings are tough. Weddings are busy. Like there's always something to be doing. Like you don't really have a lot of downtime. But I feel like seeing old teammates is always one of those where you're just like, this is gonna be fun.
I know. It was a great weekend. It was good to have people in town. We just bought a new house, so it was fun to have people at our new house and kind of host people, big things. We're doing big things, Marion.
Hey, don't even get me started on the fact that, home ownership is something they just don't teach well enough in school.
Oh.
We digress. But.
We need that home ec back in the school systems. Like what happened to how to pay your mortgage, what to look for when you're buying a house, how you know if a pipe under your house is burst or not. Like we need to know those things.
Literally.
Yeah. No. If you guys could actually tell us in the comments what we need to know as new homeowners, that would be super helpful.
But maybe we'll get an expert on here and we'll, instead of doing our little interviews right here, we'll just have 5 to 10 minutes with experts of knowledge you actually need. Not the knowledge you get in college, the knowledge you actually need. So
yes.
Let us know if you.
We're here. We're here for helpful knowledge. Everything that you need to know, including the USL Super League. It was Luana Gravias for Brooklyn. 3 goals in 14 minutes, Marion. I think Gravias she's kind of coming into her own. She's really showing her comfort level on this Brooklyn side. And having 3 goals in 14 minutes just shows how dominant and comfortable this Brooklyn attack as a whole really feels in the league.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, because we've seen Gravias in both a starting position and as a substitute. And do you ever, Anna, argue that there are some players where it's just like, I fear to start you because of what you can do as a spark plug for
totally.
us. She for me is quite potentially that player, but obviously she deserves all the recognition, all of the credit. They were well-deserved goals. They were entertaining goals. It was a very entertaining brand of soccer from Brooklyn, but we can't get away with talking about the goals given up without talking about DC's back line, right? The turnovers in the defensive third can't go unnoticed. Specifically, the inability to clear their lines, I thought was a big time struggle. And for a player like Luana Gravias, she is going to grasp onto those moments anytime she can. And she's one of those players, I think, Anna, what we've learned about her, and really from a lot of these Brooklyn attackers, they're players that truly feed off confidence. The more times they touch the ball in the attacking third, the more times they get even those half looks, those are the times often that we see them start to turn into more dangerous opportunities, more shots on goal. And that's exactly what happened.
Gravias, that was her 3rd start of the season. And you make a really good point about players coming off the bench. Sometimes that is exactly not just what the team needs, but what an individual needs to be able to scope out the game, see where they can best impact the match, and then come in and supply something different. And that's what Gravias is. She's a player who provides this creative outlet, can go about it her own. I mean, 2 of those 3 goals were all on her own. The second goal was an assist from Mackenzie Pluck, but you saw Gravias understand DC's back line and really exploit it really well. I also think, too, you look at the second half of the game, Brooklyn knew they had the 3 goals. They sat back and defended. They didn't have a single shot. DC Power tried to find their way back into the match. But when you have, 5 shots on target and you're not able to convert one of them and be dangerous at all in the first half at your home, that just turns into trouble if you're DC Power, especially as you forget the fall schedule. You look ahead into the spring.
Yeah, and it just feels like every time you think a goal is right there, even if it's a 1v1 with the goalkeeper, even if it's a clear-cut opportunity, it just doesn't happen. And so, I feel like we've been kind of back and forth on this DC team a good bit. And it's been kind of okay, we see it there. I've been a huge spokesperson for what I think that Fred Briant can bring in terms of the style and the system that he likes to play. But I think what we're getting the most consistent answer from DC, is the fact that both sides of the ball need to be looked at. And I feel like we go back to this conversation specifically with this DC team and this Lexington side almost every single week. And the difference, I want to just point out the difference in the conversation between Lexington and DC. We have been harping on Lexington's defensive inabilities, right? Their defensive inconsistencies. But what we haven't done is we haven't harped on the fact that their offense isn't helping them. Right. And I have made this comment time and time again that there's only so much pressure that a defensive unit can take before ultimately some of that responsibility starts to fall onto the attacking group to take some of that pressure away, give us a chance to play with the lead. Don't always make us have to defend 17 shots on goal in the first 15 minutes. Right? And so the difference with Lexington is the Lexington attackers help. I mean, at one point we were talking about Lexington being at the bottom of the table but scoring the most goals in this league. That's not the case for DC. And so that's the difference right now. Yes, both teams can look at their defensive inabilities, but one team's getting some major help from their offensive firepower while one is not.
Right. And Lexington's a team who's going out and getting some players who have experience at the professional level, where really DC Power's taking risks on these young players. And who knows exactly what each individual club is looking to do. DC Power might really be looking down the line, wanting to develop this young talent in DC and show that that's important to do in the Super League, where Lexington says, hey, we got to win now. So there's so many ways you can approach the season, but I look at it from like a coaching perspective. I want to keep my job. I want to stay the head coach. I want to stay in a position of importance. And in order to do that in year one, you got to win.
And we also have to talk about the importance of keeping the locker room, right? Yeah. There are so many times where we see head coaches stay, go, but ultimately, oftentimes I feel like ownership will not look at what the locker room is like in terms of authority, command, respect, all of those things. And I would argue, as a player who's been in those tough situations where it's just this constant feeling of loss, or you do enough to win the game, but somehow you just don't. And DC has had moments and games like that where they've done enough to win, but the results haven't been in their favor. Yep. But when it gets to be in that kind of downward spiral, the question that I would look at if I'm the owner is, how much command does the locker room have right now with Fred Briant? Is that something that he's really got command of the locker room? And to your point, where he's painted the clear vision of, this is what I see for this group. It's going to be tough for us to get there, but if you just trust me and you buy in with me, we're going to make it together. Or has it been kind of a hodgepodge, right? We don't have the internal knowledge of what the messaging has been. Right. But that would also be what I'm looking at from an ownership perspective, is not only, the results, but what kind of command, what kind of authority, what kind of respect is the locker room in terms of their relationship to Fred Briant? All of those things really should be highly considered in the spring season.
DC Power's in a really interesting spot. The spring's going to be important. Only 2 matches left to be played in the fall schedule. Saturday, they take on Fort Lauderdale. Just one of those 2 matches to go. Then we see Carolina Ascent drop their first game of the season. Kudos to Tampa Bay at home. It was a 3-1 win for Tampa Bay. Goals from Flint and Giomana. Bazin got her first goal and a USL kit. But you look at this Carolina side, what must their response be now that they've dropped one game, and now they're also bumped out of that number 1 spot? Brooklyn now takes it.
I'm going to maybe have a hot take here, but I actually feel like this is probably a burden that's lifted. you kind of, when you get on a run like this, especially in a season in a league like this, where there are so many inconsistent performances and teams quite literally are trying new system plays, new starting 11s every single week, it's really tough to be in Brooklyn's position where they've been consistently at the top. But if we really look at the stretch of results they've had, they've kind of scraped by, the last couple of weeks. I mean, if we look at the Dallas game on October 25th, they were basically an offside call away from a 3-2, loss there. And so it's almost felt like, Anna, for me, that it was on the horizon. It really could have been a lot of different teams or a lot of different matchups. It's no doubt and really no secret why it's Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has been putting together some incredibly solid performances, really a team just on the rise, hitting their stride at the right time. But for Carolina, I have been looking at this as kind of like, do they just want it to happen so that pressure's there, the veil is broken, there's not this whole sense of we're protecting a win streak, we're protecting a number one spot? Has that attitude really been an effect on the way that we've seen them play? I mean, think about it. How much risk, and I know that Carolina's not a risk-forward team, but how much less risk have we seen from some of the Carolina games than we saw at the beginning of the season, where this win streak, this top of the table spot discussion really wasn't happening?
That's totally fair. And I think Carolina Ascent has also lost some key pieces. You look at Audrey Harding has been sidelined. Addie Merrick has been sidelined due to injury. They're trying to shuffle in new players. I believe there's like a happy medium there. You want to stay undefeated. You believe you can still do it. You can look at Orlando Pride. They didn't drop any games on the season until the tail end of the year. But I think if Carolina stayed undefeated through the fall schedule and then they go into spring, I think there would be a little bit more of a burden. I think in this fall, with the results they've gotten, the success that they have at home, how many people show up to their games, just the club in general off the field as well, that staying undefeated through the fall schedule is something they could have done. But I think the last few games, to your point, like they were just holding on till the very end. They were doing enough to get a point out of said match. Tampa Bay, which is hilarious because 2 shows ago, we were talking about Tampa Bay kind of dipping in the table, and now they're having this success with Flint. They have Nacello up top, Flo up top, Giomana playing the 10, but really Giomana being a goal scorer and a risk-taking midfielder for this Tampa Bay side. Things are clicking for them a little bit more. And if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Tampa Bay knocking off Carolina at this point in the year.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Cecile Flo-Nielsen, when we talked to her, it just feels like she's kind of a showing of that locker room, that they are playing with joy. They are playing with confidence. They are really just buying into each other. And that's starting to show on the field. An incredible run that they've had.
Week 14 had a ton of excitement in the Super League. Week 15 starts tonight. Don't go anywhere. This is Game Week on Sirius XM.
Bringing you up to date on all the action from a busy weekend of women's soccer. This is USL Super League Game Week on Sirius XM FC.
Welcome back to Game Week on Sirius XM alongside Marion Crowder. I'm Anna Witte. This week, on week 15, we start with Dallas hosting Spokane today at 8 p.m. on Peacock. Then Carolina will host Dallas Saturday at 7. Fort Lauderdale will host DC Power Saturday at 7:30. All these matches can be found on Peacock. The match against Fort Lauderdale and DC is the most interesting because you look at 2 teams who are really struggling in the table. DC Power 1 spot out of that bottom spot. It's been really tough sledding for Fort Lauderdale. They've been without a win since October 6th. They've had 2 different formation changes. They went from a 5-back against Dallas, and they went to a 3-back against Tampa Bay. What will you think it take for Fort Lauderdale to find that explosive offense again and the correct formation that fits their team best?
Almost feels like they're tweaking too much. We've talked, well, first of all, let's get it out here that any team we've called out, they've come out, the next few weeks and just been like, never mind, never mind.
Marion Anna said we got to do it.
Yeah. So I'm just letting you guys know that we're talking badly, quote unquote, about Fort Lauderdale. So they're probably going to go on like a 4-game run here in a second. Just be ready for that, Fort Lauderdale fans. But I think that there is such a thing as overmanaging your team. I think sometimes it seems like it's too easy and you're just continuously finding the weapons that, what did we go back 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? what were we talking so heavily about with Fort Lauderdale? It was find a way to continue finding your playmakers in isolated 1v1 situations.
Yeah.
They make stuff happen. Obviously, I did throw out that there needed to be a more of a concentrated focus on finishing some of those opportunities, but the chances were there. And so sometimes it feels like that's such a simple game plan. We're going to have to tinker and make adjustments. I do think that there has been some confusion and concern about the inconsistencies with getting their midfielders involved. But for me, I don't know why you play a 5-back with a team like this. I
No.
understand that there are thoughts around it, and I understand that depending on the kind of 5-back you like to play, you're going to be looking at it more of a 3-back with wing backs. Players who play as wing backs, that is a very specific style of the game. That is a very specific type of profile for a player who can play a wingback position. You don't just throw them in there, right, to do it. And so I would urge, go back to what was working for you. It wasn't broken. It was not broken. And I think the question too, if we talk about formations, the question between a 3 or 4 or 5-back always comes down to, do I have the ability? So when you look at a 3-back, you're really looking at 3 pure center backs, right? You're not going to be looking at a player who is typically in a full back position and say, yeah, we're going to try you there. No, most of the time it's like, okay, well, we have 3 actual center backs who can really step in and cover and go 2v2 the whole time. I would argue that's the same thing for a 4-back. So typically, again, depending on how you like to play, but typically with the 4-back, your fullbacks are looking to add the width, right? Especially if you're playing something like a 4-3-3, even sometimes like a 4-2-3-1. Your fullbacks are looking to push up into that space. In that case, you're always leaving your center backs 2v2. Very similar to a 3-back, where sometimes you have one that's pushing up, right? One that's maybe trying to invert and be another passing angle. You're still going 2v2. So it almost makes you think, if you're going to play like a true 5-back, it almost makes you think you don't trust your center backs enough to be kind of in that 1v1 matchup for the majority of the game. And I think that Fort Lauderdale center backs are some of the best in the league.
Right. I mean, they also have 3 different center backs. You have Vaca, you have Gaynor, you have Reese Klein, who has stepped up and been an exceptional center back once she got into the system. There could be a balance of trying to figure out, who are our best players going forward. Let's put them all out on the field together and figure out what's going on, because right now what we have going on isn't necessarily working. People have gotten our film. They figured out that we want to go wide and then we want to come inside. However, the 5-back, I agree, is never going to work with this Fort Lauderdale side, because your center backs are so athletic and can get going forward. Plus, you put Felicia Knox in a more defensive role, which makes no sense, because yes, she can distribute and she wants to get the ball wide, but she also has the ability to get forward and take shots. So when you make her have to play a little bit more of a defensive role, it doesn't make much sense, and it does feel a little bit controlled. And I think Fort Lauderdale, I mean, even Addie McCain the other week when she came on the show said, like, we are going through a lull, we'll figure it out. However, they're taking too many steps to figure it out, because like the formation's insane. And you're looking at the conceding goals. It's not an issue for Fort Lauderdale. They've only conceded 11 goals this season. So don't work on the defensive end of the piece. Get a little bit more dynamic, maybe with the attacking piece, using the wide players and Addie McCain as your target.
I'm just not sure. And I understand the reason I wanted to make that comment. You're totally right, Anna, about Felicia Knox especially. Again, I've watched Felicia at the college level, covered her at the college level. She is a dangerous threat who actually can hit from distance quite well. We just haven't even seen her get near the 18-yard box.
Right.
It feels, for the majority of it. But like going back to the comment about the 3-back, the 3-back is not the problem. If you want to play 3-back, great. Like, fine. You have the defenders to be able to do that. That's why I don't think you need that 5 across the back. But here's my thing. If you want to play like a 3-5-2, okay, that's like a wing back situation where the 5 are going to drop down and it's going to look, or the 2 are going to drop down to make it look like a 5. And then in the attack, it's going to look like 5 midfielders. Okay, we all understand a 3-5-2. If you want to do that, again, you have to have the personnel to be able to play those wing-back positions. When I'm looking at the roster, Anna, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really see a true wing-back here.
No.
to help with this
No
three
Julia
back,
Dorsey type player.
Agreed. Totally agreed. And so I think that that's where some of the problem is. I also think with the 3-5-2, we talked about isolation with the players out wide. Oftentimes, you start adding more clogged spaces centrally, higher up the field. What does that do? Well, Addie McCain maybe is going to run into the corner when otherwise Gordon would be in a 1v1 situation. Those kinds of, because you have so many player personnel in the attacking third of the field, sometimes things just get too complicated. And that's like the whole point of it. There is nothing wrong being a team that beats people 1v1 and gets services and gets in line, as long as you are sure that when you get services and when you get in line, you're making the moments worth it. And so I just, my urge would be go back to how you were playing a couple weeks ago, and you'll be all right.
Fort Lauderdale's lucky because they take on DC Power this weekend. DC, they're in a tough spot. They've conceded 4 and haven't scored in their last 2 matches. However, they've only got 2 games left this fall schedule. They got Fort Lauderdale this weekend, Lexington the following week. When you look at DC Power, what does their focus have to be in these last 2 matches?
I love that question because it's a question that stumps me.
I know.
Because we just talked about how they need help on both sides of the ball. And so I'm going to put my attacker hat on, and I'm going to call them out. And I'm going to say, look, you guys have had help defensively. Yeah, you're leaking goals at the moment, and you kind of have in and on and off, but you also haven't ever given your team a chance to not have to chase.
Right.
And that is a different defensive mentality versus knowing that you're sitting in a comfortable lead or an early lead, 1-0, 20 minutes in. Score the first goal. That's my choice. Score the first goal and see what happens. See if it doesn't change. See if the dynamic of the rest of the game doesn't begin to play itself out a bit differently. Give yourself a chance in the lead by scoring the first goal and just see what happens. Right. That would be, let's keep it simple. There's a lot of different ways that we could go about this, but that would be my challenge and my urge.
I like that one. I think that's so important because that's something that DC Power has struggled with this entire fall schedule is scoring goals and figuring it out. We know their defensive efforts have been good. You look at Madison Power. She has held down the fort back there. And you got to give kudos to their goalkeeper, Morgan Aquino. She was called up to the Australian national team, her first senior call-up. Obviously, these national teams have their eyes on these Super League players, which is awesome. But it can't.
And she's earned it. She's had good performance.
And she's had to endure a lot. And it's not just a new team. It's a new league. And there's a lot of newness, new opponents, new film you have to watch. However, if everybody else in the league can kind of figure it out, including Lexington, DC Power has the tools to do it as well. That's what
no more needs to
be
said.
No more. Mic drop on that one.
Well said.
All right, well, don't go anywhere on game week. We have Brooklyn's head coach, Jess Silva, joining the show. It's game week on Sirius XM.
Bringing you up to date on all the action from a busy weekend of women's soccer. This is USL Super League Game Week on Sirius XM FC.
Welcome back to Game Week on Sirius XM. We are now joined by Brooklyn's head coach, Jess Silva. Coach, thanks so much for joining us. I mean, you have such a cool journey to this Brooklyn side, but really to me, the most interesting part is the fact that you took 6 months off before you actually took this job and moved to New York. So what did you learn and what did you do in that 6-month period between your last 2 jobs?
Well, first, thanks for having me, guys. It's really exciting being here. 6 months off. I mean, when you're a coach, you don't have a life. You're in this tunnel vision moment where you breathe and live and eat and sleep football. Like you'll dream about coaching players and coaching them and what you're wanting to do in the next action. So you kind of get, really tired, I get at a certain point, but most importantly, you stop learning because you're just doing all the time. And I'm not saying that we're not learning when we're doing, we are, but we don't have much time to think about it and take some space and breathe. And the other thing about it is like football is sorry, I'm going to call it football. It's not
totally
soccer
fine.
To me, it's football. It's practiced really differently. There's different methodologies, different pedagogical approaches all over the world. And that's what's beautiful about this sport. It's not just played in one place with one vision, there's no instruction manual to it really. So you never get time to explore different avenues as a coach because you don't have time to leave the environment and actually learn or just ask questions to someone else who's living the same thing as you. And those 6 months to me were probably the most beneficial in my career thus far because I had a wealth of experience and different experiences in different environments, but I no longer had the time to breathe and actually explore different things. And I really like to learn and grow and see how other people are doing things. And you kind of just piece it all together and it gives you fresh ideas and a fresh mindset to come into a new environment and build it differently and better than what you thought you would.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I kind of want to piggyback off of it and just like go even deeper with you because I feel like one of the things we always talk about as analysts or play by play is we all have differing opinions, and the beautiful part about the game that we all play or watch or coach is the fact that to someone a certain way to play is going to be their preference versus for me a certain way to play is going to be my preference. Same goes for coaching, same goes with players. I'm curious how you would assess, based off that, how you would assess kind of before you took that break, what preference, what styles did you really hone into or go towards? And then post that break, what were some of those new things that you really felt refreshed by?
Yeah, I don't know that my style of football really changed. I think the style was just enhanced, or like I went to countries like Spain and Portugal and Italy. So it was very Latin European countries. So the style of football was very similar, but it was more the practice and how the coaches
Mm,
were going about trainings. It was more about the developmental aspects of how to build a club and how to diversify how you're making players and enhancing their evolution and their performances. So the style of football I have or that I appreciate has always really been the same, but I guess it's more how I go about it within the training environment and how you do things with players, how you do certain exercises, how you manage your staff is completely different from one environment to the next. And I think that was very eye opening for me, anyways. And I came back with a bunch of takeaways, and now I'm getting an opportunity to try them in North America, which is really cool.
You're in such a unique position because this is a brand new team. This is a brand new league. Everything that you've learned in the past and anything you want to implement, you can do that. So, what were those things that you bring over from Europe that maybe us here in North America or in the States in particular don't really do when it comes to the training and preparing for games?
I think, I mean, you'd have to ask my players because they're American and accustomed to what is done normally here. But what they've been telling me a lot is about how heavy the sessions are cognitively. Like when we're asking them to do the thinking, the reflecting, the decision making. Sometimes they're asking me like, "What do you want from me here?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What do I want from you? What do you want from yourself there? What do you see? What's the game asking from you in that space?" Um, I feel like a lot of the players that at the beginning, the first month and month and a half, they're like, what does Jess want? But it was never really about what I wanted. Is what were we trying to do as a team collectively?
mhm.
What is the game requesting of you at that moment? And where do we need to be? The other thing is, I think I've brought a lot about these half positions and being in the right position at the right time and being mindful of those transitional moments, which is something that they were maybe less accustomed to, especially the forwards. The forwards had I think coming out of college would navigate forward and not kind of get realigned into the team shape and team block. So defensively, I've been quite not strict, but like we're a disciplined defensive team. So it's something that we've spent quite a bit of time on getting them to restructure and reform. And yeah, it's about teaching them to play together, really.
I love your team. I think that your team plays a very exciting brand of soccer. And I think that it's been, at least for Anna and I on the show, it's been really cool to watch you guys try and practice different things, whether that is a different starting 11, whether it is a little bit of a different shape defensively, and just kind of seeing, to your point, Jess, just seeing the gears turn for your players has been really cool for us. Have there been any, so I have two questions. One, have there been any surprises for you? Obviously, I don't know how much you had in terms of expectation when you came here, but have there been any surprises for you in terms of the players or really like the talent level of the Super League? And then my second question for you is just about your team and how you would describe this group of women. If you had one word to describe them, what would it be?
Um, so to answer your second question, the one word that like literally automatically came to mind is resilient. My group of girls are the most resilient group of girls I've coached in a really, really long time. We've had some hurdles as a club, as an organization, because navigating the realities of New York are kind of tough.
Yeah.
But the club has responded to those, and we're working together with the group to try to make the conditions and everything much better. But the group has been so resilient and super mature too, because it's one thing to go through a couple hurdles and then kind of just sit on the hurdles and be like, shit, this is hard. But it's another thing to really focus and lock down into the football aspect. And that's something we talk about from a culture perspective, is that the field is the field, the off-field stuff is the off-field stuff. And the girls are really learning about how to be professionals, of coming to the game, locking in as they cross the white line. We're putting them in some challenging positions at times in the matches or in trainings, and we're just really, really resilient. Like if you look at our play, it doesn't matter if we get scored on or score first. We're just going to want to play a 90-minute game, if not a 101-minute game. And we've lost a string of games too. You know, we've had moments that things have been difficult, but we're trying things and we keep going. You know, we're about a growth mindset. So it's all about like one step at a time, one day at a time, and being resilient no matter what's being really thrown our way.
Resiliency, coach, was really the word you could have used in the month of October, because like you guys went through this crazy schedule and now you're number one in the league right now in the standings. But I think just as important on the field when it comes to soccer and this brand new league, off the field is as important as well. You look at leagues across the states and across the world, the branding and what you're doing off the field really impacts on the field. So outside of the roster building, what is one thing that has been really important to your team's success and going forward as well?
Yeah, I think I touched upon it a little bit earlier, but culture, the team culture, the club culture that we're trying to build. We know we have a very particular opportunity here to build something. And it's like we're laying the foundation. I even made a joke about it in an earlier podcast of we're actually digging the hole and creating the hole for the foundation to go in. And we have an opportunity to create the DNA of this club. And we've all had different experiences that have gone positively, like they've gone maybe a little bit more towards challenges. And we get an opportunity to build something and leave it in a manner where we would want to leave it for other people to come and enjoy. So we've taken that to heart, that this opportunity to grow this project, we've taken it to heart of doing it right. And we have these culture meetings and we've set culture objectives with values around our team that are very important, that are as present as they are off the field as they are on the field. So all our values are associated to actions that are being done on the field, but also actions that are necessary off the field.
We had Samantha Rosette on earlier this year, and she echoed that exact same message. So it's pretty clear that you guys are aligned on what you want to achieve here and how monumental it could be for your group. And I just I want to pick your brain. I feel like Anna and I sometimes, we mention this, you know, it's a tough league because there are 8 teams, right? And so quite literally any result can just completely flip the table. And that puts you guys in a really interesting position as a head coach, because, you know, like if we look at obviously other leagues that are more further along, or even if we just look at the college game, there are like clear pictures of, okay, we need to do this and we need X amount of points. We're not really there yet. And so I just want to peek into your mind as a head coach, how you kind of manage, if you even manage, the expectations of a table. As Anna mentioned, you're sitting in first place, right? But like we said, that could easily be flipped with just one result. It's hard not to have kind of this mindset of like, okay, we've totally lost the first spot in the table. So impactful. But realistically, that one loss isn't, because you could go the next week and do the exact same thing to another team.
Yeah, we're not very, like, we want the results, guys. Any coach that tells you that they're not going for results is at this level is it's not true. It's not true. We want to win. We want to win every game for sure. But for us, what is really, really most important is the process of how we do that. So I'll give you the example again of those 2, 3, 4 games that we were struggling, not getting results. We thought we were playing quite well. We had two of those 4 games that we lost, we thought we were the better team and should have came out with 3 points. So this is a league, as you mentioned, one game can shift it. We saw that at one point the 7th place team was playing the 2nd place team, and if the 7th place team would win, they would become the 3rd place team.
It was wild.
This league is going to
Insane.
go to the last day. It's going to be super competitive, and it's going to be exciting. And that means we need to stay on our toes, be consistent, and stick to the process. And that's what we're trying to do. We're not looking at the table too far. It's in front of us. We're not ignorant. We're seeing it. We're happy. Obviously, we're happy that all our hard work is showing. Sometimes it doesn't. Hence those 3 or 4 games that we had a little bit of difficult results. And it might happen again, but we're ready to take on whatever is thrown our way at this point.
Coach, you said Portugal was your favorite place that you've lived so far. So you got this 3.5-week break between your last game and your next game. What is a place they have to eat and a place you have to see, maybe in the city in particular, during this long stretch of time off?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I have not been able to visit Manhattan like I've wanted to. So
I
I'm
figured.
really, really excited to go see this tree light up. I want to go see
Rockefeller
Amen.
Center?
Rockefeller light up. Yeah, I want to go see this tree light up. And honestly, I can't even tell you names of places that I have to eat at, but I know there's so many restaurants and so many great places. I might ask some of the girls to give me some recommendations because I know a lot of them come from here and have some good recommendations.
I want to know what has been, and this is going off of what your social media. I've loved your social media team, by the way. Props to those guys; they've done a great job. But I want to know, based off a video they did earlier in the year, what you think with your small amount of time so far that you've been in Manhattan. What is the most overrated part of New York? I have the answer in my head of what one of your players said. I'm curious to see if it's the same for you.
Overrated place.
Overrated. You can do underrated after. We got to have overrated first.
Oh my gosh, this is a tough question, guys.
I
You're
know.
putting me on the spot.
Let me tell you the two. Let me tell you the two they said. One of them said the yellow taxi cabs. Obviously, that's okay. Another one actually had the nerve to say bagels.
Okay, well, I'm gonna say bagels.
You co-sign.
I co-sign.
She was like,
I'm
I
from
didn't want to say it.
Montreal. I'm from Montreal. We have the better bagels than New York.
That's why
Really?
I asked you. That because that's what I've heard. Yeah.
I haven't heard this.
Yeah.
Tell us why. Tell us why.
Scarps brought bagels. Scarps is Leo Scarpelli. She brought her family. These players have fantastic families. Tips off to them, but they bring bagels, sometimes toilet paper. You know, you never know what they're bringing after games. Players are getting bags, coming into the locker room with bags. It's funny. Scarpelli had a bunch of bagels, and that weekend my father and my parents were both into town, so I had some backup on the bagel argument.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they came in with these huge bagels. They're round and huge and plump, and it's just bread.
Massive.
It's bread. It's bread, guys. If you take a Montreal bagel, there's a particular taste to it, and they're thinner and they're
Okay.
crunchier. So you have to try them to understand, but I vote Montreal bagels.
That's what I've heard too, and the reason I brought it up is because I am not like the thickness of the New York bagels that I've seen. I've never had one, so like let me just put that out there. But the
What?
thickness
You
of the
haven't had a
bagels-
New York bagel?
No, I haven't. I haven't. So that maybe that's why I'm so invested in this because I'm like I feel
Wow,
like I'm
okay.
leaning towards the Montreal bagels.
I don't know anything
because of
about
how thin
Montreal
they are.
bagels, Marion, but a New York bagel to me, I love the bread, right? Like I'm completely in my sourdough era. I make my own bread right now at home.
Oh my
Wow,
god!
So
you
the
Yeah.
more bread, the
Yeah.
better. I know. It's really not as hard as I think a lot of people on TikTok make it sound. But yeah, I want to ask Coach one question since you brought up Scarps, which is on the back of her jersey. How did that come to be? Did she ask for that to be on the back of her kit, or was that something like, how did that work out?
Yeah, the girls can write what they want. Like you have players that put their first name or their last name,
Sure.
right? So you can kind of choose what you put on the back of your jersey, and she just put her nickname out there.
Coach, thanks so much for your time. It was so great to get to know you a little bit. Honestly, the next time we see you in person, I expect Montreal bagels. If we can make that happen, if there's like a certain brand we can get in person, I would love to do like a taste test.
I just love that you waited, Jess, until you had some backup. You're like, I've been thinking this, but I cannot make this argument until I have at least a few people on my side.
It just happened to be there. Like, my parents were there and my dad was there, and he tasted Montreal. But he's like, no, Montreal bagels. But my dad also promised the team he'd bring up some Montreal bagels. So I'm gonna have to make sure he holds his word.
Please do. We need to see that pictures. We need like hot takes, the whole thing. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Coach. Enjoy this 3.5 week break, and good luck the rest of the fall schedule.
Enjoy, Coach.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.
You've been listening to USL Super League Game Week on SiriusXM FC.